Content warning. This podcast may include foul language and discussions on sensitive topics such as historical atrocities, crimes, violence against children, sexual assault, mental health issues, murder, and suicide. We understand that these topics can be difficult for some listeners. If you feel that this content might be triggering or upsetting for you, please take care of yourself and consider skipping this episode or listening at a time when you feel better prepared. Your well-being is very, very important to us, and we want to make sure you have a positive experience. As always, if you need support, please reach out to a mental health professional or a support network available in your area. Thank you so much for tuning in, and enjoy the show. In case I'm found dead, blame no one but me. Charles Lemp, 1949.
Welcome to Crypt Walkers, the podcast where the eerie and enigmatic come to life. Hosted by a police officer, Ryder,
But there was definitely something
in that house.
and his co-host, William,
Legitimacy first is more important.
director of WTCW Paranormal.
Hey guys, and welcome back to another case episode of Crypt Walkers. My name is Ryder, and this is...
Will with WTCW Paranormal.
Thank you so much for tuning in and joining us as we open the crypt and take a walk into the shadows of the unexplained. If you are new here, whether you're a skeptic or a true believer, prepare to open the gates and uncover stories of ghosts, cryptids, haunted places, and mysteries that defy all logic. Now, the case we are covering tonight does have additional media. Now, what that means is that if you check us out on our socials, you can actually view images and extras associated with this particular case. It's a glance at our case file, if you will. Now, we post additional media typically right at the time a case premieres, so if you are interested, be sure to subscribe, follow, do whatever you need to do so that way you get notified whenever we post an episode and you also get that additional media. Check us out on Instagram. That's where you'll find it. That's the best way to find it is at Instagram at CryptWalkers. So to start off, the case that we have tonight is the Lemp Mansion in St. Louis, Missouri. So William, have you ever heard of the Lemp Mansion?
I've heard a couple of things, yeah, but the full story is a little bit of a mystery to me.
Okay. So I'm originally from Missouri, so the Lemp Mansion is kind of a very famous location that is near and dear to my heart. It's been explored and it's been heavily documented, right? So like every ghost show that you know of has done it. So, Ghost Adventures, Ghost Hunters, all that stuff. It actually was listed, and I think it still is, it was listed as one of the most haunted locations in the United States. It's got a long, tragic story, okay? So at the beginning of this podcast, we had a content warning. I strongly recommend that if certain topics, especially that of suicide, has a triggering response, I would not listen to this episode going forward. We do appreciate you coming and listening, but I just want to highly recommend that this story kind of gets a little tragic. So
Yeah, it is a shame. It was a continuous cycle of grief for this family, very clearly.
Yeah.
While there were some mysterious aspects to, these suicides themselves, it's still a shame regardless.
Absolutely. Yes. And as a podcast host, I want to be as respectful as possible. Okay. So we're going to be stating just the facts and things like that. So there's not going to be any sort of theatrical flair to it. A majority of the notes that I gathered for this episode tonight was taken from Troy Taylor's book, The Big Book of Missouri Ghost Stories. And we will credit Troy in the show notes, as well as any other links that we pulled any information from tonight.
It'll also be linked on our Instagram and TikTok. Shameless plug.
Yes, it will be linked in our TikTok and our Instagram. So, in the beginning, okay, everybody knows for the most part that St. Louis has a big beer brewing history, right? Like, you know that, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's like, Budweiser, king of beers. Anyway,
Well, you're gonna
so
rile some people up. You're gonna rile up the Bud Light people who are listening.
I know, there's people listening. So, the Lemp Empire was started from a lager brew of beer, okay, which was a new thing back in the early 1800s that Americans hadn't really come across. The Lemp legacy was founded by a man named Adam Lemp, who came to St. Louis from Germany in 1838. He started out running a grocery store where he made his own vinegar and beer, which I found out recently vinegar is like made by like oxidizing, I think, wine. I don't know.
I would not have known that had you not told me that. I figured vinegar would have been created in
Yeah,
a completely different process.
apparently it was because of a big mess up. Somebody was making wine and they screwed up
Yeah.
and they oxidized it and it became vinegar. Anyway,
Yeah, I
moving
would say
on.
for the people with the short attention span, like, where's the paranormal? Like, we're contextualizing. Okay, we're getting there. We're
Yeah,
contextualizing.
we're definitely getting there. And by 1845, because he was becoming so successful at selling beer, Lemp went ahead and closed the store and purchased land above a limestone cave and began building a brewery. There he would store and sell beer full time. So Adam went from being a poor immigrant to one of St. Louis's majorly wealthy citizens.
That's a real rags to riches type
Oh
story.
yeah, it's
there.
definitely a rags to riches. So he died in 1862, but he left his brewing company and all of its assets to his son, William Lemp. Okay.
That
So,
guy, that's a really cool name that guy has. I really like that.
yeah,
William.
William Lemp.
It's got a nice ring to it. William.
Yeah, of course it does. Of course it does. Of course you like that name. So, William, who was born in Germany in 1836 and lived there until he was the age of 12, then he was brought to the United States. He expanded the business beyond his father's wildest dreams. So he went from basically it just being a small building located over a cave where they would make the beer and store it and everything to suddenly like a huge factory. And the factory still exists to this day. The building does.
So the son turned it. It was from like rags to riches, and then from riches to money isn't the key to happiness type rich.
Yeah, William basically Willy Wonka'd it.
he turned in his own personal beer factory.
Yeah. So anyway, William was a good steward for the city, and he was highly regarded by all that knew him as a genuinely good man. This is the type of guy who, even though he owned what would equate to billions of dollars today, he was the guy that would go down to the floor and actually work with the factory workers just to be on their level, if that makes sense.
He was like the chill boss at work.
Oh yeah. So being successful, he was not only successful in his business life, but he was also successful in his family life. He had 8 children with his wife, Julia Feckert. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Feckert. I could really mess that up and then it ends up into something else. But they had 5 sons. William Jr., who was known as Billy. William Jr., Louis, Frederick, Charles, and Edwin. And they had 3 daughters, Anna, Elsa, and Hilda.
8 kids.
8 kids. I mean, but that was common back then. We're talking late 1800s. So
this dude William was a freak.
I do find it funny that 2 of his daughters were named Anna and Elsa. But anyway.
he was like, he had a premonition.
Yeah. So, but I mean, keep in mind, German family, right?
Yeah.
So during the peak of the Lemp Brewery's greatest success, William Lemp also purchased a home for his family close to the brewery in St. Louis's Soulard district. It's like Soulard. So Soulard. And at the time, that was a very prosperous area. And now it's kind of run down, to be honest with you, in today's St. Louis. But so the house that was built would become the Lemp Mansion. That's what exists today, is the Lemp Mansion.
Bum, bum, bum.
Bum, bum, bum. Yeah. So, and I'm going to quote this directly from Taylor's book. The mansion boasted elegant artwork, handcrafted wood decor, ornately painted ceilings, large, beautiful bathrooms, and even an elevator that replaced the main staircase in 1904. So even when the Lemps had it, there was a continual upkeep / upgrades, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no kidding.
Because so they replaced the elevator in 1904, but the mansion was originally built by Jacob Fikert, which is William's wife's father. So his
father-in-law.
His father-in-law, yeah, in 1868, and it was financed by William. In 1876, Lemp purchased it outright for use as a residence and an auxiliary brewery office.
So he was doing operations for the brewing company in his house, pretty much.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Just to be clear, I was like, okay.
Yeah, he was so like parts of his house had like a nice, elegant office for him.
Yeah.
So people would meet him there to do business.
So whole picture is pretty much father immigrates from Germany, creates beer company gets huge, guy dies, son inherits it, now it's double huge. Now he lives in a giant mansion.
There is a cave system that is underneath the mansion. You can actually, to this day, you can still access the network of caves underneath the mansion through a trap door. And I believe down a spiral staircase. They didn't have it open for us when I was there. More about that later. But you can actually access the tunnels, and it will take you underneath the brewery, which is a great distance away. Like we're talking, there's miles of tunnels underneath this.
Yeah.
Underneath this whole area.
We're talking the Descent type cave, pretty much.
Oh yeah. And the caves were very crucial to the Lemp family's success because the caves were big enough and they were at a constant temperature of about 55 to 60 degrees all year round, and that's where they could actually store the barrels of beer.
So he pretty much used the cave under his house as a giant refrigerating system.
Oh yeah, and keep in mind this is in the 1800s, so it's not like you could just go get a refrigerator. You know what I mean? Like that was kind of a big deal, and it was a big part of the success. So, plus I think this is me just talking. It might have had something to do with how well the beer tasted, because
maybe so.
Usually, like alcohol will like soak in its surroundings, I guess, as it gives it a certain taste.
Yeah. Especially if it's in a wooden barrel, like how they used to contain it last time, because the wood absorbs pretty much whatever the hell is around it.
Exactly. So, I mean, I'm not an alcohol aficionado, but there's that.
I mean, I don't understand why we didn't keep doing that as a tradition, as humanity. Like, imagine you're at a buddy's house. He's like, "Hey, you want a drink?" And you're like, "Sure." And you're like, "Hold on." He just opens a trap door and walks down into a cave to grab you a drink.
So there is pictures of, and we will post this. There are pictures of what those caves and all the barrel. Like you'd be surprised how much they stacked up as far as barrels. Like holy crap, in these caves. So, like I said, we'll have that all posted. But the caves are important. It's a part of the legacy. And we'll go ahead and continue with this story. So, by the early 1900s, the Lemp family's empire was at its peak. Everything's going perfect. They're making money, buku's amount of money, like more money than you could do. Okay, more money than God. And William's family life is going relatively well. Okay. Well, just when they're at the peak of it, shit hits the fan.
Prohibition.
Well, Prohibition is a part of it, but no, shit hits the fan before that.
Oh,
Like,
before Prohibition.
Before Prohibition. But now we have to talk about one of Williams's sons. Okay, like I said, he had 5 sons. This son's name is Frederick. Okay, Frederick was born in 1873, so not long after the mansion was built.
So to be clear, the son who inherited the business was William. Now we're jumping on, and that's who we've been following. Now we're jumping on over to Frederick.
Yeah, so the way that the family tree works is that you have Adam Lemp, okay, granddaddy, all right, big daddy. He starts it all. And then underneath him, you have William Lemp. And he's the first William. You have William Lemp. And then directly underneath him, you have the kids. So you have William Lemp Jr., who is also known as Billy, and we'll get into him later. We have Louis, Frederick, Charles, and Edwin. Okay.
Sorry, guys, this story is generational. We're going down the ladder.
Right. And then he also has 3 daughters, Anna, Elsa, and Hilda. So he has 8 kids in total.
We're limping on up the family tree right now.
We're limping on up the family tree. That's right. That's right. So Frederick was born in 1873. He was William's favorite son. Okay.
Wow. He admitted that?
He was very much about that. He was like, "Yep, you're my favorite."
It was like an autobiography, and they're like, "Do you have a favorite son, Frederick?"
Yeah, and he was an obvious heir to the company. Okay, so he was going to get the throne, so to speak. He was intelligent, ambitious, and hardworking. He was also well educated, graduating from Washington University, which is a university in St. Louis, with a mechanical engineering degree, and he had a degree from the United States Brewing Academy out of New York City. So he was
a real legit mixologist.
He knew his direction and he was going for it. So he worked hard at the brewery, doing long hours, doing everything that needed to be done. He learned every single level of the company. Like he should have been the heir. I'm just putting that out there because you'll hear about this later. But if he became the heir and it was actually took over the company after William passed, we might actually still have a Lemp beer to this day.
You just spoiled the story. So now our boy Frederick, now we know he's not going to get the company.
Yeah.
Something goes horribly awry.
Something goes terrible awry. So he worked hard, and people would even say that he was a bit of a workaholic. In 1901, Frederick suddenly became overcome with a mysterious illness. And to try to combat this illness, his doctor actually ordered that he move, and go to Pasadena, California. It's never explicit on exactly what type of illness he had. It just says that he was sick.
For the era, it was probably like tuberculosis or something.
Probably. It would make sense that he would need to move out west. And he got slightly better. His family, William and his mom, Julia, they went out to California. They visited with him. Everything was going well. He was like, okay, it's time to come back home. So he went ahead and comes back to St. Louis and suddenly relapses. And by December 12th of 1901, Frederick died. He was 28 years old.
So, oh, wow. So he died pretty young.
Yeah. 28 is a young age. I can say that because I am 28, damn it. And I still feel young. So this affected William, like, heavily. It affected William.
So his self-admitted favorite son has now died.
So to quote Taylor's book again, William and Julia were both devastated by their son's death, but the loss was especially hard on William. Brewery secretary Henry Volkemp later wrote that when news came of the young man's death, William Lemp broke down utterly and cried like a child. He took it so seriously that we feared it would completely shatter his health and looked for the worst to happen. End quote. So it hit him hard, like hard. So I already previously explained how William was as a person and the way that he interacted with his people, right?
Real
Is
personable guy.
real personable, real friendly. He began to withdraw from the public. Uh, he his habits completely changed, and for the most part, he became a recluse. Over time, wounds began to turn into scars and heal. He started to kind of come out of it, but almost as soon as he did, he got bad news again. In January, on January 1st, so New Year's, 1904. So this is only a few years after Frederick died.
Yeah, not even 3 years.
William learned of news that his best friend in the whole world, Frederick Pabst, another Frederick, by the way.
I say not
I
so
almost
good.
wonder if he named Frederick after his best friend, but anyway.
Yeah, maybe he was the godfather.
Yeah, Frederick Pabst had died.
Yeah. So, status
This,
update. Pretty much, William inherited the company from his dad.
Mhm.
William planned on giving the company to his son,
Mhm.
Frederick, because of his skills. Frederick passes away, and then William's best friend, Frederick, also passes away. So now we're down to the other 4 sons and his 3 daughters. That's where the family tree is at right now.
So the loss of his best friend absolutely broke William. And back to Taylor's book, quote, on February 13th, William excused himself from breakfast, stating that he did not feel well. So this is in the mansion, by the way. He went upstairs to his bedroom, and around 9:30 a.m., he shot himself in the head with a .38 caliber Smith & Wesson revolver. There was no one else in the house at the time of the shooting except for the servants. One of them, after hearing the shot, tried to open the bedroom door, but it was locked. She ran to the brewery and summoned Billy and his younger brother, Edwin. They hurried back to the house and broke down the bedroom door. Inside, they found their father lying on the bed in a pool of blood, with the revolver still gripped in his right hand and a gaping and bloody wound at his right temple. At that point, Lemp was still breathing but unconscious. Doctors were called, but there was nothing they could do for him. William left no suicide note behind, although the family knew how depressed he had been. He was 68 years old. End
Mm.
quote.
Man, for back then, that was pretty old.
Yeah.
Yeah, I say for back then, he lived pretty fruitfully.
Yeah. He lived a pretty long life in
So-
ways of,
So was this the first death in the Lemp Mansion, or did Frederick pass away in the Lemp Mansion while sick as well?
So the sources never really say on whether or not Frederick passed in the mansion.
I'm sure I could
I-
imagine. I could imagine if he did, they would specify that most likely.
Yeah, I think he probably died in St. Louis, but probably not in the mansion.
He probably died in hospice.
Yeah.
More than likely.
Yeah, because it was
their idea of hospice back then. He probably died in like an outhouse.
Yeah.
I don't know how they did hospitals back then.
So, especially if it was an illness, they wouldn't know if it could spread, maybe.
Yeah,
So, I mean,
yeah.
who knows? But as far as the historical stance on it is that this is the first death in the Lemp Mansion.
Gotcha. So death by suicide, 38 caliber Smith & Wesson. Keep that in your brain.
Yeah,
listeners at home. 38 calibers. Okay, keep that in your head.
Yeah,
Okay,
keep the 38 there, and then also keep the fact that there was no suicide note. So,
because this will come back up.
Yeah. Well, somebody has to take over the company, right? So we just lost the guy who was really running the show, and he was running it very well. And we also lost the guy that was going to take over from him when the time came, and he was going to run it very well. So who do we have next in line for the throne? Billy Lemp. Billy Lemp, for all reports, and this is all based on just research, Billy Lemp was like the exact opposite of the other two.
So he just did not have it together, really.
He was Tony Stark before he became Iron Man, if that makes sense. Like, he had money and he didn't know what to do with it. He had more money than God, and he really wasn't business oriented. Okay.
I mean, I can't blame him. I'm sure, he wasn't expecting to inherit it. The majority of people, average people, if they inherited a quintillion-dollar business, they'd be,
Yeah.
it would definitely be an adjustment.
So he, I mean, I will give him credit to this. There's definitely evidence that he tried to keep it together, but I don't think he really crossed his mind on how bad things were. So he was married, but he was also like partying around, and like there's even like talks of like there might have been almost like a damn brothel in
Oh
the
my God.
mansion. I mean, he was like party,
He
you
had his
know,
own personal harem going on, pretty
right.
much.
And so his relationships like were very tumultuous, if that makes sense. So, and we won't get into all that because it's another long story. There's actually a possible legend that's based off of that. We'll get into in the hauntings part of this episode. Once we reach that part, we'll go into a little bit of what might have come from Billy's situation. But so now we're at basically Prohibition era. Okay. Billy hasn't really been running the company well. Things are becoming decrepit, deteriorated as far as the factory, and we're talking a massive factory. And so even if Prohibition didn't happen, if he didn't change course, if he didn't actually step up, the Lemp legacy would start to fizzle anyway.
And
Okay.
that's what ended up happening. Evidenced by the fact that nobody listening to this, or I would imagine nobody, has drinking a limp beer in their life.
Right. So the Prohibition hits. And for those of you who don't know what Prohibition is, basically in the 1920s, the 18th Amendment was passed by the U.S. Congress, making alcohol illegal.
Yep. And that's when speakeasies became a thing, and
Speakeasies became a thing, and then also, which by the way, as far as speakeasies are concerned, if you had a freaking cave system, that's like perfect.
That's the ultimate speakeasy right there.
Many brewing companies just changed directions. They began producing something else, right? And I'm probably talking off the top of my head here because I don't know this factually, but like Anheuser-Busch, which was also around at that time. And in fact, the Bush family was actually friends with the Lemp family.
Bush as in Bush Light, not Bush as in
Yeah.
George Bush.
Yeah. That. Thank you for clarifying. I realized maybe I should have clarified. But like they started like making cans and things like bottles and stuff, and bottling other things, not just alcohol. So they changed what their factories were producing to stay in business. And that's how they made it through the Prohibition. And they probably made liquor on the side, but we don't want to talk about that.
Well, this is a very beer-oriented episode, and speaking through WTCW Paranormal, we're located in Hampton Roads. One of the most famous haunted locations in Hampton Roads is the Cavalier Hotel, and the most famous ghost story is how Andrew Kors, I think his name was Andrew. It was something Kors, right? And this is you probably know where this is going. The creator of Coors Light rented a room. He rented a room in the Cavalier Hotel, and then one night just jumped out from the top floor and killed himself. And nobody knows why he did it. It makes no sense to anybody. He just did it.
Oh, that's going to be a podcast episode. It definitely is. But we gotta finish this one because I'm realizing that the history's pretty extensive, and I'm still working on it. So I gotta start speeding it up. Otherwise, I'm going to lose listeners' attentions. Billy was that wasn't even on his radar. Oh, I got to try to save the company. So he went ahead and just literally closed the plant without notice. So workers had just finished their day, their work shift, and then they went home, and then they came back the next day, and suddenly the doors are locked. That was their notice.
So I'm sure you guys can kind of see where the irresponsibility from Billy is coming in here.
Yeah, so it's like, guess what? You have no job anymore, so good luck feeding your family. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of a dick move on Billy's part. So by the early 1920s, the brewery was sold to the International Shoe Company, and they took over operations and I'm guessing made shoes. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So now I told you this story was tragic. So now we have to move on to the next tragedy. Elsa Lemp, one of William Lemp's daughters. Okay. Elsa was the youngest child in the family. She was born in 1883. In 1906, she was known as the wealthiest unmarried woman in the city when she gained her inheritance from William. She later married a man named Thomas Wright in 1910, who was also wealthy, but by 1918, it ended in divorce. Their relationship was very stormy. Like it was back and forth and arguments, blah, 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 blah. It was very rocky. But in 1920, they remarried in New York City. And after I guess you would say the how do you say it? Like the next wedding, the second wedding or whatever. After they got back together, after they got rehitched, they returned to their home in St. Louis, Missouri. Now, this was not the Lemp Mansion that they returned to. Okay. And this is a short while afterwards. And I'm going to go ahead and quote from the book again because the writing in this is just perfect. And Taylor did a very, very good job. And I highly recommend, if you get the opportunity, like I said, the book will be in the show notes. I would give this a read because there's a lot more. This book is pretty in depth, and not just on the Lemp family, but on other hauntings that are in Missouri. So this is quoting Taylor's book. They returned home to St. Louis and found their house filled with flowers and cards from friends and well-wishers. But all was not happy with the newly remarried couple. Whether she was plagued by regret or bothered by something else, Elsa slept little that night. Claiming that her stomach was bothering her, when her husband awoke the next morning, Elsa told him that she was feeling better but wanted to remain in bed. So this is right after they get back home, by the way.
So they just got remarried.
Yeah, I mean, it literally just happened. Thomas agreed that this was the best thing for her, and he went into the bathroom and turned on the water in the tub. He later stated that he heard a loud noise. And when he went to see what it was, he found his wife in bed with a pistol lying next to her. She had been shot. No suicide note was ever found, and Thomas Wright claimed that he had no idea she even owned a gun. The household staff never heard the shot. When questioned later, they stated that they had seen no sign that Elsa was depressed or intended to end her life.
Mm.
Right.
So we're body count. So William's gone. William's best friend Frederick is gone. William's son Frederick is gone. Now Elsa is gone in the same way that her father passed, which was by a gunshot wound to the head, 38 caliber bullet.
Here's what's interesting, and this is a cop coming out. This is my police intuition. It's interesting because a doctor was summoned, Dr. Samuel Fordyce, who is a Lemp family friend. So he was summoned to the scene. At no point did Wright, her husband, ever contact the police. In fact, the police were not contacted until 2 hours after her death, and only by the doctors calling them. The doctor called them. So
he didn't call the police, nobody. The way the doctor found out that this had happened is from the doctor just calling the house just because, and then the husband picks up and is like, oh, by the way, my wife is like dead. Can you come over?
Oh, no. So the staff called the doctor
the staff called
to come and check her out. So obviously she was dead by this point, but he came, and you would think that the husband would call the police, but he never did. In fact, it was only the doctor that actually called the police, which was 2 hours after her death. So obviously the police are a little interested in this.
Right. Suspicious of the husband because the wife has a lot of money. There's definitely would be a motivation there for the husband to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, unlike the death of William, where he had motivating factors to do so, he was depressed because his best friend. He was depressed because his son. Whereas Elsa seemed to be living lavish and then gets remarried and then is like, oh, I'm dead. You know what I mean? That sounds more like the husband shot her and then just put the gun in the same bed and was like, she shot herself.
Yep. And this is just the cop in me, but I believe it was the husband. So I don't know. But
Yeah.
I, to this point, it's unknown. Like,
Right.
I'm guessing they probably said it was a suicide. I don't know what the actual official death certificate says, because keep in mind, this is 1920. So there's no
Yeah. I was gonna
easy way
say,
to investigate this other than he said, she said thing. But
right.
so anyway, to quote Taylor, Wright became quite agitated under the scrutiny of the police investigation that followed, but he always denied having anything to do with his wife's death. Not everyone believed him. Unquote.
So we're not the only ones who are kind of
No.
tilting our head at this fella.
Yeah. So now keep in mind that happened outside of the Lemp Mansion. Now we get back to the Lemp Mansion, because guess what? The Lemp curse is still happening. On December 19th, 1922, Billy was observed in his office inside the mansion. So at this point, prohibition is active. The brewery has been sold. He's also starting to liquidate other assets. He's basically like, oh crap, I'm in
Yeah, he's
debt
in
here.
trouble.
Yeah. They still have enough money that he could technically live a nice life. From what I have heard and from what I have read, the family did have enough assets outside of the brewery that they could theoretically continue. And some of the other siblings actually had lives outside of
Right.
the brewery. But anyway, so by a staff member, Billy was seen in the mansion at his desk. The staff knew that he hadn't been feeling well recently, and when his staff member asked him if he was, if he was feeling better because he appeared better, Billy replied simply, "You may think so, but I'm feeling worse."
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not weird at all.
His staff member's like, "I really don't know how to reply to this, so you have a good one, and I'm gonna go ahead and go up and do whatever I need to do. My staff things, He only had
Yeah.
a couple servants. And so he went off and did his thing and left Billy in the office. Moments later, a shot rang out, and Billy was found on his office floor after shooting himself in the heart with a .38 caliber pistol.
So we've gotten three 38 caliber suicides,
Mm-hmm.
and the business has been passed down 4 times by this point, if my math is correct. So
Well,
Adam Lemp founds it, gives it to his son William.
gives it to
William,
Billy, so
yeah,
it's
William.
been, yeah.
Well, William planned on giving it to Frederick. Frederick
Yeah,
died.
yeah.
He gives it to Billy. So it's like this business is. I mean, it's floating around.
Yeah, and so he leaves no suicide note. We have no idea why he did that.
Yeah, probably stress if I were to theorize, but I mean, who knows? Who knows? He clearly wasn't a good businessman from previously established details. Maybe he didn't know how to take on, all that pressure.
Right. So we have, at this point, 2 suicides in the house in a relatively short amount of time. Like we have, 1904 to 1920, that's not,
Yeah, no, that's 16 years apart.
yeah.
So the
So,
distance between those suicides could have a driver's license, pretty much. So not too much.
yeah. After Billy's death, the Lemp Empire, as far as anything to do with the brewery, collapsed. Like it's done. It's no longer anything like that. It's a history at this point. The brewery is still there today. You can still see the Lemp name on the side of the brewery. Most of the buildings are abandoned now. And the Lemp Mansion lives on as a bed and breakfast. But as far as brewery, that's it. It's there's no more connection to that. So in 1929, Charles Lemp, so one of Billy's brothers, okay, moves into the mansion. Okay. At this point, when Billy was around, the mansion wasn't really a residence anymore. It was turned into more or less a secondary office. So everything was kind of condensed to the mansion as far as like all the offices and stuff.
Yeah.
So when Charles moved back in, he turned it back into a residence.
Okay. So William had it as a house. Billy turned it into an office. Now we have Charles coming back in, turning it back into a house. Okay. Okay.
Charles was a banker. He worked in the financial industry, and he was big into the Democratic Party. That was kind of his like claim to fame locally in St. Louis. But he really had nothing to do with the brewery, even when it was around. He didn't. His interest didn't lie there. It was just the family legacy, and he was known to be a little bit peculiar. Okay, so he was doing the COVID-19 thing long before COVID-19. He had the mask, he had the gloves. I mean, he was kind of a bit of a germaphobe, which for those of you who don't know what germophobia is, it's
I'm sure
basically
they know.
you're afraid of germs and afraid of getting sick. And I'm probably with the mask thing, I'm definitely probably overdoing it there. But he was known to wear gloves even in his own house. You
Yeah.
know,
So
just
he's scared. He's so scared of germs. He's scared of his own germs, pretty much. So
right. He reduced the staff number down to only 2 servants, and he had a dog.
Man, 2 servants while living so frugally. I know.
Mm-hmm. From the reports that I found, he lived alone. Like, I don't think he had a wife or anything, and he was a bit of a recluse. This is kind of speculating, but Charles referred to the whole family situation as a curse.
So he referred. So that was his claim,
Mm-hmm.
supposedly, that the unfortunate events that befell Frederick and his father and Billy before him was a generational curse.
Yeah. Billy even was quoted, and I read this somewhere and I got to find it now, but I feel bad that I can't remember exactly where I saw it, where I could cite it. But when he learned of Elsa's death, he was like, "What do you expect? We're limps."
So it
So
wasn't
it's like
even.
they
It
all
was
kind of
yeah. So it wasn't even people from the outside in the town looking in and creating this urban legend of the limp curse. The limps themselves
mm-hmm.
were recognizing the pattern
And
and
we'll
saying,
go into some of the legend on why that might be once we get into the haunting side of it. I promise you, we're almost done. We're almost done with the history. I promise. At this point, I think half the episode is just this. So I mentioned Charles. Charles is weird a little bit. He's a little bit out there. As he got older, he began to experience a lot of arthritis, and he was almost in constant pain. So I almost have to feel for this guy, especially since he was kind of a germaphobe. I wonder if an illness had something to do with it. Obviously, there's a lot more to this than what I would know. But Charles prepared for his death in advance. In 1941, he wrote to a local funeral home, and in this, he basically stated, "Do not bathe me. Do not change my clothes. If you find me dead, do not bathe me. Do not change my clothes. Cremate me immediately. Do not publish an obituary. And I want no funeral service." Now, I'm paraphrasing what was basically said. So he wrote this letter to the funeral home in 1941. Okay, now I'm going to go back to Taylor's book, and I'm going to go ahead and quote this part. So by age 77, he was quite ill. This is talking about Charles. On May 10th, 1949, so 8 years after he wrote that letter to the funeral home, Albert Bittner, who is a servant for Charles, went to the kitchen and prepared breakfast for Charles as he normally did. He then placed the breakfast tray on the desk in his office next to Charles's bedroom. Bittner later recalled that the door to the bedroom was closed and he did not look inside. At about 8 a.m., Bittner returned to the office to remove the tray and found it untouched. Concerned, he opened the bedroom door to see if Charles was awake and discovered that he was dead from a bullet wound to the head. Bittner hurried to inform his wife of what had happened, and she contacted Richard Hawes, Lemp's nephew, who then summoned the police to the mansion. When the police arrived, they found Charles still in bed and lightly holding a .38 caliber Army Colt revolver in his right hand. He was the only one of the family who had left a suicide note, which he had dated May 9th and had written, quote, "In case I am found dead, blame it on no one but me," unquote, signing it at the bottom.
So we're on 38 caliber
Mhm.
suicide number 4 here, and this would be the third 38 caliber suicide within the Lemp Mansion.
Yes. And there's actually another element here, and this is something that Taylor doesn't mention. And I don't know if he doesn't mention it simply because, he doesn't want to be, uh, kind of insensitive. But so remember how I said he had a dog?
Yeah.
Yeah. This could be triggering, but reports have said that he shot his dog before shooting himself.
It's so weird though. Like, what's the point of doing that?
Yeah.
Like, you know what? I'm about to go out, but I'm tired of you too, Marley. You just take a shot. I don't understand why.
Marley and me forever, man.
Really, I'm taking you with me, motherfucker.
Yeah. So I have tried to look things up on that. I was told about it when I was actually at the mansion, and on some of the shows they mention it. So I do know that clearly there's a
rumor there.
I would say it's more rumor than fact. I would trust Taylor's point of view on it more than that, because for the most part, like I said, this book is amazing. In an online article published by neatorama.com, so this is in 2014, titled Lemp Mansion, Tale of a Cursed Family and Their Haunted House, authored by Lisa Marcus. Marcus writes, "The Lemp Mansion became a boarding house when it was sold after Charles's death. The once magnificent structure deteriorated and was in a severe state of disrepair when the Richard Pointer family purchased it in 1975 in order to convert it to a restaurant. As they worked to renovate the mansion, the Pointers experienced a number of unexplained occurrences. Once, when Richard Pointer was painting Billy Lemp's former bathroom, he was frightened into leaving early, and describing the event, Pointer said, quote, "I was painting the bathroom by myself, there was no one else in the house, and I felt someone behind me, watching me. I mean, it was a terrible feeling, the most burning sensation you could have. I get goosebumps just now thinking about it. I turned around and nothing was there. I started working again and got the same feeling, so without looking behind me, I cleaned my paintbrushes and got the hell out of there." Unquote. Pointer hired a local artist named Claude Breckwood to restore the mansion's hand-painted ceilings. Breckwood was not informed by Pointer of any strange going-ons at the mansion. Yet he too had a similar experience. Breckwood said, quote, "I was on the scaffolding, lying on my back and painting the ceiling in the dining room when I got the feeling that someone was staring at me. I felt as though they were in the hallway just outside the room, but I couldn't see anything through the frosted glass doors. I went on working, and about an hour later the feelings returned. It was weird. I felt like I just had to get out of there right then," unquote. Breckwood left without cleaning up, washing his brushes, or even locking the door behind him. He told Pointer, quote, "That place is crazy. You must have a ghost in there or something," unquote. Pointer's son, Dick, was once sleeping in the mansion, alone except for his Doberman Pinscher, Shadow. He and Shadow awoke to what sounded like a loud bang and a kick outside his bedroom door. A subsequent search of the house turned up nothing. One night, Dick was closing the restaurant with an employee when they heard 2 keys played on the piano in the empty mansion. A search for anyone who could have made the sounds was fruitless. Dick, his sister Patty, and various Lemp Mansion employees and guests have experienced unexplained events too numerous to recount here. These include a candle on the mantel becoming inexplicably lit, the drawer of a furniture piece that belonged to the Lemps opening and closing by itself, glasses moving, objects disappearing and reappearing in different locations, soft, disembodied voices, and even hearing the clip-clop of phantom horses' hooves on the street leading to the carriage house outside.
So from detailed accounts, being from the family renovating and things like that, as soon as there's more than one person involved in a haunting, like as soon as there's more than one person, when somebody else sees the activity, that's when things get a lot more interesting. Because for me, when I have to do a house call or somebody calls me for an investigation, one of the first questions I'll ask them while they're describing the activity is, has anybody else seen it? Because then, while mental health is always a factor, the simple fact that there were multiple witnesses helps rule that out quite a bit.
Yeah. So I would, yeah, I could, yeah, I could agree with that. So, and speaking of multiple people, so the pointers say that over the years, they've lost a number of employees due to this. Okay. And this is also from Marcus's article. One such incident involved former waitress Bonnie Strayhorn. I love it when they actually have names of people, not just, oh, a waitress said this. It's
Yeah.
like, no, this person said this. She explained, quote, early one morning, I was going through the house, making sure that everything was as it should be as the restaurant opened, when I noticed a dark-haired man seating at a table of what was originally the Lemp family dining room. He was facing away from me, so all I could see was the outline of his shoulders and head. I was surprised to see someone in the restaurant so early, but I asked him if he wanted a cup of coffee. He did not answer. When I looked away for a moment to flip the light on, I turned around and he had vanished. Unquote. Strayhorn quit her job that day and sought employment elsewhere. She said it was impossible for a man to have been sitting there and then to have exited the room without her seeing him do so. Like I said, this article was written very well by Lisa Marcus.
Imagine it like wasn't even a ghost and she was the first person to encounter the Flash. Like she encountered like a real superhuman.
Oh my God. But
They,
like I
but
said, from a police officer standpoint, it's a little bit more substantial because it's an actual name of a person.
yeah, it's documentation. If you were to contact this person now that you have their full name, you know what I mean? It's like, more credibility. Um, but yeah, I mean that it's just the whole history around the location. If you take ghosts out of the equation entirely, I mean, you could imagine a building like that just has bad juju.
Oh yeah.
Like just from the simple fact of like, well, everyone keeps killing themselves with a 38 caliber bullet, you know what I mean, over and over generations, and it's like something has to be going on here. Which I will come out to say that I would argue that probably half, at the very least, half of those suicides of the 4 suicides were definitely murder. I would say, like that, especially the one with Elsa. That was extremely suspicious circumstances.
Yeah,
At least in my
I
book,
could definitely see the Elsa one. The other ones, I don't know.
I would say that it was Charles who left a note, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for him to mail the funeral home saying, "If you find me dead, don't blame anyone else. Immediately cremate me," screams, well, okay, I'm about to kill this person, so I'm gonna write into the funeral home to eliminate suspicions, right? Like
Right.
that, you know what I mean? It's like, and then burn the body immediately. So if I did leave any evidence behind, burn it.
Mm-hmm.
Burn it for me. And
Charles was just weird. I'm not
I
gonna
mean,
lie. Charles kind of
I
gives
mean,
me
he's
weird
definitely
vibes.
a strange guy for sure from the sounds of it, but it's still just like, I mean, how murdery does that even sound on paper?
Yeah.
If I'm found dead, don't blame anyone else. Like that literally sounds like, P.S. I'm a murderer writing this, so this isn't Charles.
Right.
Don't go looking for anyone who might have killed me. It was me, I swear.
Yeah, it was
You know,
totally
it's,
me.
it's just super suspicious. You know what I mean? In my book, but I don't know.
The
That's just me.
the I mean, I personally have investigated this house to kind of wrap up some of the haunting stuff. And I was probably about I was probably 18, 19, somewhere around there. I took a trip, St. Louis, and I had been there previously with a friend, with some friends, and so I wanted to go back, and I did it on my own, and I went ahead and brought a spirit box with me, which I'm guessing you're familiar with the SBS7, right?
Oh, of
Spirit
course, yeah.
box.
It's
Yeah.
most standard.
For those of you who don't know, a spirit box is a small radio-like device that is used to com- communicate with spirits and quote unquote other supernatural things. It works simply by cycling through radio frequencies to create white noise. Edison was actually one of the original, Thomas Edison was one of the original creators of a spirit box, believe it or not.
Yeah, but back then that would have been called necromancy, not ghost hunting.
A little bit. And essentially, if you hear something through a spirit box, if you hear like a one word like you're hearing that over like 12 frequencies a second. So it's impossible for a radio frequency like a radio station to 12 different radio stations all at the same time to say
Yeah,
so it's usually kind of substantial. It's used a lot in like Estes method.
yeah.
I prefer Estes method because it's less likely to have what's it called?
Confirmation bias.
Confirmation bias. Now, I will say this, when I was there and I was alone in Billy's office and I was doing a spirit box session, I was alone. No one was around me. So you're obviously coming off of what my take is on it. And I had been doing the spirit box session for a while, wasn't capturing anything. And then all of a sudden, I'm talking about the suicide. And at the time, I really hadn't done a lot of history on it. And I knew that he had killed himself with a gun, and I wrongfully assumed that it was in the head. And I heard a voice come through, heart. It was just one word, heart. And I didn't think anything of it, to be honest with you. I didn't understand what that meant. I thought, well, maybe his heart was broken or something. Keep in mind, I was, 18, 19. I really wasn't as historically accurate, in my research. But later on, I came across Taylor's book and other things, and I learned that, oh no, it was actually he shot himself through the heart, which, by the way, is weird. Like,
Yeah. So that bit of evidence took about a decade to marinate in your noodle, pretty
yeah,
much.
I do remember it coming across heart, and it sounded like a man's voice. There really wasn't much other than that. My stay there, I heard footsteps and things like that when there really wasn't anyone around. A lot of the normal ghostly stuff, which could be chalked
Yeah.
off to
Well,
the house just being old.
well, the way I put it is, when I'm explaining to my team you know, the symptoms of a haunting, house call is usually the same stuff: footsteps, knocking, doors closing, etc.
Mm-hmm.
I usually just put it as the standard hocus pocus every time. Standard hocus pocus.
Standard hocus pocus. But I mean, today the mansion is still owned by the Pointer family, and it is a bed and breakfast now and a venue. So you can actually have like a wedding there and other things. And of course, they kind of lean into their spooky side.
Of course.
So I mean, if you had a haunted mansion, why not? So overall, the house is beautiful. Like, it is just gorgeous when you go in there, and it's it's a true testament to the time in which it existed. And the Pointers did a good job of restoring it back to its original grandeur. And it's a wonderful location. I would love to one day go back and maybe find a way to get access to the caves. I would also love to investigate the brewery itself, because the brewery also has its own paranormal activity.
Stories.
But
Yeah.
that's
Well,
a topic for another time. But
yeah, maybe a little part two. But I would say, even besides any of the paranormal stuff, the story itself, I mean, there's so many things to be taken away from that. the story from rags to riches. I feel like the whole story itself is a statement about the cycles of grief. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? One family member kills himself. Another family member gets distraught about it. They kill themselves. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And it's like it's just cycles of grief that can be observed. You know, get rid of any of the generational curse stuff. It's a really tragic story, and it's just very interesting, really, for what it
Yeah.
is.
There's also a lot of legend that is associated with this case. Uh, the Cherokee nation were said to have believed to have used the caves for, their own. Uh, I wouldn't say rituals, their own culture, if that makes sense. And so
They
there are
cultured.
beliefs among some that, when the Lemp family started to use the caves for their own gains, and now keep in mind this is in the 1800s, so um, it's kind of believed that there was a curse that kind of fell upon the family. Now, granted, I say this is very much legend. I prefer, especially as a police officer, I like to have facts, like actual, like I can trace it back to this point. Whether there is any actual Native American connection, I don't know. That's up for debate, and it's honestly up to our listeners to kind of decide. There's also a ghost boy that is associated with the mansion. His
Man,
name,
get that out of here. I'm so tired of it. I was
yeah,
talking to you about that the other day.
yeah,
Why does every house that's supposedly haunted have to have a little ghost boy or a little ghost girl? I don't care anymore.
yep.
It's not cute. It's not sad.
It
Come on.
the legend goes is that Ezekiel Lemp is the illegitimate child of Billy Lemp, and he had Down syndrome, which back in Billy's time was not uh, considered, you know, good. You were considered damaged. So
Yeah.
he was basically locked away in the mansion. Nobody ever knew him, and he died.
Dang.
So it said that, and this is what does make it weird is that, and I ran into this on the Queen Mary. There's no actual like connection, and there's no real proof that Ezekiel ever existed.
This
And yet there are people that have encountered boy spirits, like little pictures of, you know,
encountered what they think is a boy spirit.
right.
And listen, confirmation bias is real. If you
Mm-hmm.
go into the haunted location and they're promoting Ezekiel up the wazoo, and you take a picture of something that looks mildly like a little boy, you're gonna be like, "Look, it's Ezekiel."
Actually, I don't really remember them really promoting Zeke. I do know that the St. Louis Paranormal Society, I think it's called, is a paranormal team up there, and they have supposedly uh, encountered things with Zeke, uh, or what is believed to be Zeke. But they never outright say this is Zeke. It's kind of like
Yeah,
this is stuff that we captured. Is it Zeke? Who knows?
yeah.
You
I
know?
mean, for the viewers at home, as somebody who literally talks paranormal every day of my life, it, any paranormal story you hear, take it with a grain of salt. Any
Yeah.
paranormal story you hear with a little child ghost involved, take
Mm-hmm.
microdose a grain of salt with the
Yep.
story. I swear to God, I can't. You'll start seeing the pattern as the series goes on and more episodes come out. You're gonna get tired of hearing about little children ghosts too.
and
Trust me.
and that is also why I purposely like put this towards the very end. It's
Yeah.
it's worth mentioning only because it's a part of it, but even me, I'm like I
See,
I like the facts better. I mean, I
yeah,
don't know if I was talking with
yeah,
Billy. I just know that that's
right.
what came through, and I didn't know about it at the time. It didn't
Well, at
connect,
least we
but
know Billy for a fact died in the house.
mhm.
So we don't even know if Ezekiel existed.
Right, right.
You know what I mean? It's just like I don't know. The Shining, the two little girls from The Shining have done irreparable damage to the paranormal community.
Yeah. So, and that's the other thing too. That's why it's great to have. Yes, spooky stories are great, and I mean, I'll be the first to admit it. I believe that there's something more. That there are spirits and things, but not everything is paranormal. I
No,
I
no,
wonder how many of the things that happen at the Lemp Mansion are chalked off as paranormal when they're not. Uh, but
it's
like, there's a mirror on the second story landing, I think, alongside a big staircase. Um, the mirror is said to you see a lot of apparitions in, and I'm more inclined to believe that only because some of the stories that I have come across, and there's a lot online. Some of the stories I've come across that feature that mirror uh, is the person doesn't even know what the Lemps look like, and
yeah.
they see the apparition of William Lemp. So I think that about sums up this case. If you have had any experiences with the Lemp Mansion, or if you know a lot more about the Lemp Mansion than we do and we left something out, or even if we got something wrong, reach out with us, communicate with us. We want feedback. So
We
leave
aren't
a
hard to
review.
find. Instagram.com/cryptwalkers.
Cryptwalkers. Everything is at Cryptwalkers, and obviously our link tree is in the show notes. William's link tree for WTCW is in the show notes if you want to follow some of the stuff that he does. And I, like I said, this case is very history based, and if you
Yeah,
made it all the way, if you made it all the way through, thank you so much for listening.
yeah. Now you can say you're officially a Lemp Mansion expert. In case anybody asks you.
Yeah, and tell us what you think. I mean, we kind of went over some of our conclusions, but do you
Yeah.
find it?
What are your theories?
What did you find that was interesting? And also just tell us if you had an opportunity, would you spend a night in the caves?
I would.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I'm curious to what people would say. Would you spend the night in the caves underneath the Limp Mansion? Disregard all the Native American
I mean,
folklore or anything, but
it's a nice temperature down there.
it is a nice temperature. But
Nice and cool. You're not gonna get hot while you sleep.
yeah,
Just might have to worry
almost.
about getting smushed under the weight of a house. That's a little bit.
It's as cool as a crypt.
Ooh. Can we put it?
Yeah,
Can
I
we
did
insert?
that.
Can we
I did.
insert the laugh track right there?
Yeah, I just went there. I did that.
I just went there.
So be sure to stick around because we will have a trailer for our next case. So after we're done talking here, stick around. You'll hear it. Should be interesting. So I'm kind of excited about our next case, to be honest with you, because our next case, William has a connection with. So
Ooh. Yeah, I got connections
yeah.
like that. I'm underground.
Yeah. So again, guys, thanks for listening. And we're going to go ahead and close up the gates to the crypt yard and join us next time.
Bye.
Next time on Cryptwalkers.
Every house has a story, and with over 300 years of history, this house has many. On our next case, we're venturing deep into the heart of Virginia Beach, Virginia. Nestled among what would look like basic suburbia, this manor house still stands as a testament to centuries of history. This grand estate is no stranger to the paranormal, with a past that has witnessed so much: a witch trial, the birth of a nation, the scars of slavery, and the Civil War. It really isn't a stretch to say that the Ferry Plantation House is active. From mysterious voices in the night and even sightings of century-old apparitions, this house has seen it all, and so much more. So, open the crypt, take a walk with us, and prepare to step inside a house where the past never stayed buried. Episode airs Wednesday, November 20th, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Are you ready to walk amongst the crypts with us? Subscribe now on your favorite podcast platform and never miss an episode. Don't forget to leave a review and share your own paranormal stories with us. We might feature them in an upcoming episode of Crypt Walkers, the Listener Files. Check us out on social media by clicking the link tree in the show notes. If you want to send in your own case or spooky story, email us at contact@cryptwalkers.net. Also, be sure to check out William's adventures with WTCW Paranormal by clicking his link tree in the show notes.
This podcast is a Miko Line Media production. The names Crypt Walkers, a paranormal podcast, and WTCW Paranormal is owned by its individual owners. All rights reserved. Music by Quentin Colbitz and Max H. Music and sound design created by Miko Line Media and licensed through Artlist. Copyright 2024.